Hello, everyone. I am Aksa Taylor, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Abstract Security. Joining me today is Matt Carothers. And over to you, Matt. Why don't I give you this time to introduce yourself?
I'm Matt Carothers. I work for Cox Communications. If you're not familiar with us, we are a cable company and ISP. I'm the Senior Principal Cybersecurity Architect for Cox, and I've been here about 23 years.
Wow, amazing, amazing. And Matt, a little bit about your experience. 23 years, great experience. I mean, you've been in the industry so long. I'm sure
Yeah.
you've seen all kinds of fires, all kinds of lessons learned. What are some things that you see organizations? I'm not specifically talking about Cox, but even maybe among your customers, peers, just in the industry of this uh, data operations industry. What do you see as the top challenges that organizations face?
Oh, there's so many. One of them is just data management. We all have so much data in so many places, and finding it and making it searchable, normalizing it, making it useful instead of having to go to five different places to find anything that you need is a huge challenge.
hmm And how mature are organizations? Do you think that we're in a place where, most of the large organizations I'd say are mature, or even in a place like, hey, we're still figuring things out. Doesn't really matter how big an organization is, there's still work to do. What are your thoughts?
I think there's probably a sweet spot in size. A small company probably doesn't have a lot of organization just because they don't have the knowledge. A large organization probably doesn't have the organization just because they have too much data in too many places. The
Mm.
larger and older a company is, the more technical debt that they have, the more dozens of products that they've launched over the years, and the more different databases and vendors and things that they need to wrangle.
Yeah, absolutely. So, can you share any battleground story that you personally experienced during your career, lessons learned from data battleground?
Yeah, absolutely. The one that kind of kicked off this paper we're talking about was our SIM. We had a SIM with a bunch of devices that were pointed at it, and the SIM was looking at the security logs and generating alerts. And one day we discovered that it was too small. We didn't have enough log retention. So we went to the vendor and asked how much it would cost to add some log retention, and it was a really big number. So I
Hmm.
thought, maybe we need to look around for a different solution. That led us down a really interesting path. One
Hmm.
of the key challenges we faced is that we had thousands of devices that were pointed at this SIM. And we couldn't just say, oh, let's stand up a second SIM to try out. Let's POC some new vendors. Because every time we did that, we would have to reach out and change every single device that was sending logs.
Hmm.
And some of them don't support multiple log destinations.
Hmm.
So we ended up building a logging system that's a multiplexer. All of our logs go into this single log broker. The broker then makes copies of the logs, normalizes them, transforms them, whatever needs to be done, and then sends them out to as many destinations as it needs. So now, if we decide we hate our SIM, we can just stand up a second one or a third one and send copies of the data to it for as long as we need to before we make a cutover.
So, who were involved in this strategy or thinking about the migration with your different SIM platforms? Was it from top down? Was it from bottom top? Like, was it the people, like SOC operations, like actually dealing with data who came up with the challenges faced, or was it from like a management decision, like, hey, I need you to go research? How did that come about?
It was more from the bottom up, I would say. We actually discovered this as part of an audit. We needed to store a year's worth of logs in our SIM, and we didn't have enough disk space for the full year. And of course, our analysts also kind of hated the SIM. The issue with having all your logs in one tool is that you never get the best of breed for anything. So the SIM was super good at real-time detection, but when it came time to do a forensic search to say, how many times have we seen an IP address over the past 6 months or something like that? That was type in your query and wait 6 hours and come back and maybe it's done. So
Mm,
another advantage of our log broker approach is that we could send our real-time events into a SIM, and then we can send somewhere completely different, in our case, an Elasticsearch for long-term storage or fast searching.
mm-hmm. Oh, that's interesting. So it was a bottom-up approach, like you saw the people dealing with data saw the problem, but also
Mhm,
kind of affects the organization because you're going through an audit and you have to meet the compliance requirements. So it's kind of hand
mhm.
in hand. And how long did it take you guys to, because you said you had so many sources integrated and many of them didn't support multiple logging integrations. So how long, how much effort was placed into this?
Oh, it was a huge effort.
Hmm.
I don't know exactly how long it took, but certainly months and, maybe even years.
Oh, wow. So years spent in the migration from one. And did you end up having multiple SIEM platforms after this or completely moved away from your existing one?
We completely moved away from the existing one.
So do you think that's what added to additional effort, or it would have been just regardless because you had to asset inventory everything and try to move pieces. So it was probably like a full revision kind of effort.
I say years because it's a task that doesn't actually end. We're always onboarding new log sources.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, the task of getting the log broker stood up initially and getting a new SIM in place was probably less than a year, like maybe 6 to 9 months. But it's an effort that still continues today because every time we launch a new product or somebody puts a new device on the network or something, we have to figure out what the logs for that device look like. And of course, every time there's a security incident, we may discover a new type of device that we didn't know we needed to look at before.
Well, let's talk about security. Let's zoom into it a little bit. What role does security team or data governance team have on these changes? Is it like a hierarchical thing where you get approvals, or are they like hand in hand always working with the telemetry or data teams that deal with data? What sort of collaboration or is it all under one umbrella?
It's a mix. So we have an architecture team that's responsible for onboarding new projects or new devices or whatever. So when someone in the company wants to put something new onto the network, they have to go through our security architecture team. And that team has standards which include logging. Same
Mhm.
for network devices. We have golden configs that require logging to be in place, things like that. So we try and get it as early as possible. But then, of course, there are tactical issues like someone reports to us that an IP is compromised in some way, and we don't have logs for whatever that thing is. So we have to figure out who owns that and why is it not logging.
Mm, that's a good approach where you have logging as part of the requirement. So
Mhm.
always, anytime there is a new data source, it just becomes like a preemptive requirement before you even start using it. That's a good approach. Talking about good approaches, so you've been very active in contributing to this paper. What was the personal motivation on why you decided to contribute to it?
Just trying to make the world a better place. Uh, our life is less painful now with the architecture that we have today, and making other security professionals' lives less painful makes us all better.
Absolutely. And what why should people read this book? Like what's different about this versus what's already available out there? Is it the fact that we have maturity levels that we talk about, which just a little glimpse on the book for our viewers? Or is it, hey, it's a lot of personal stories and lessons learned that makes this book unique? What are your thoughts? Like what are you excited about?
It appeals at multiple levels. So if you're talking about a practitioner who's actually using the logs, the techniques in this book will make your life less painful. Instead of having to swivel around to multiple data sources with different field names and never knowing what to look for, you can have it all in a single pane of glass in one format. From a more strategic perspective, from a management perspective, this architecture will save you a ton of money. So it is built on open source. You don't have to use open source, but you can. It's horizontally scalable just by throwing more hardware at it. In our case, that's a capital expense versus an operational expense, which is what our finance department likes to see. This architecture allows us to reduce our SIM licensing cost by about 90% because we're only sending events that actually have active detection use cases to the expensive SIM that's billed like on an EPS, events per second rate, or billed by how much data you put in it.
Hmm. Um, Talking about your experience in the industry in general, not specific to any one organization, um, what are things you wish you'd done you that you know now that you'd known then when you were working to either implement a strategy or revise one that's already there? What are some things that you know now you wish you knew then when you were practically in it?
I think we would have started with normalization sooner. The
Mm,
first thing that we did was, of course, just put all the logs into the system in the format that they came out.
mm,
And that results in all the data being in one place, but not necessarily being in the same format.
mhm,
So by normalizing it, we happen to use Elastic Common Schema because we're using an Elastic Stack, but there are others out there. We make sure that all the logs have the same field names, which makes it much easier to search for things. Then,
mm,
of course, we also developed this thing we call distillation, which is not just normalizing the data, but extracting what the data means and storing just the meaning of the data. I think we would have started on that a bit sooner.
mm. And do you think from your peers or people or in other organizations that you know of, do you think that's a common problem, or do you think people are mature, like organizations are mature? What are your thoughts?
I think it's a very common problem. A lot of what we look at, or what we're presented with at least, are just raw logs. The example I was use is Apache web logs. So uh, you might be looking at an Apache web log and you've got, say, a URL that was accessed by potentially a threat actor. It's all well and good to have that raw log, but what you need to know is, what does that log mean? So if that specific URL was accessed by a threat actor, does that mean that something bad happened? Or was it just like a drive-by scan?
Mhm.
Uh, for example, on our Cox.com site where customers log in, we know that hitting, say, login.html with an HTTP post followed by a redirect to success.html or something like that, that sequence of events represents a successful login. So
Mhm.
what we want to store is just the fact that a successful login happened rather than 3 or 4 lines of raw Apache logs that could be interpreted to mean that.
Mm. So it's not just, hey, we have logging in place, a checkbox, but it's, do we have the context in the logging, in the logs that we're collecting, enough for our forensic teams, our incident response teams? And
Mhm.
but then there is a balance, right? Because you can have so much logs, like so much amount of logs or volume of logs that now you lose context in the noise of it. But then you can
Mhm.
have too little or too um, summarized level where you lose the actual information or the meat of the data. How do you balance that? Like, how do you know? Um, do you go data source by data source, or do you have kind of like a general idea on, hey, if it's an incident, I want these format, I mean, these level of information. How do you go about it?
Well, in practice, we keep both sets. So we'll have the summarized log that has what the thing means, but then we'll also have the raw log because you don't always know what fields you need, especially if you're looking at something complicated like an Azure sign-in log. There's, I don't know, like 50 or 100 different fields in there, and you don't always need to look at them, but you never know when one of them is going to be that smoking gun that you really need.
So is it your team that sits and defines these policies for filtering,
Mhm.
or is it manual work, or is there any automation?
We have an internal governance process. On a source by source basis, we have documented here's what the raw log looks like, here's what the normalized log looks like, here's what the distilled log looks like. Here's each of the fields that we know from the raw log, how they map into our own custom fields, that sort of thing. So that, say, we bring a new analyst onto the team, they can just look at the documentation to understand what's going on instead of having to relearn it.
Okay, so that sounds like a good process. You have documentation in place, so it's not
Mhm.
like a single point of failure. If one person leaves the company, you don't know what was going on. It's
Yeah.
educated across the team, and that sounds like a pretty good maturity level for an organization. Is that a common thing you think, or do you think it's because yeah, you're already nodding, so I'll let you answer.
No, I don't think it's very common at all. And onboarding and offboarding of employees is a big reason why we do this.
Hmm.
So if we went through an incident and figured out that these 3 or 4 Apache logs equal a successful login, now the people who worked that incident know that. 6 months down the road, if we have another incident and there's a different team working on it, or maybe the same team, but they've slept since then, they don't remember exactly which log corresponds to what, having to go through and figure out again what a raw log means really slows down your process. So by doing this process of normalization and distillation and documentation, it speeds up that learning curve when a different member of the team is working on something or someone is working on something that they haven't looked at in months.
Hmm. That's good lessons learned for our viewers. Anyone who's thinking of, setting this up from ground, I think there's good pointers here from Matt. And let me just ask you, if you were to give three pieces of advice to someone who is like, I started in this org, I'm a CISO, I need to come up with a good strategy for how we're dealing with data. What would be your three suggestions to them?
Number one is to maintain your flexibility. Don't get locked into one vendor.
Hmm.
When something goes wrong with that vendor, or you need to expand your storage, or you need a key feature that that vendor doesn't support, you don't want to be in that situation. You
Mhm.
want a system that's flexible enough to expand quickly, even going so far as to be able to expand it on the fly in the middle of an incident.
Mhm.
Number two, I would say normalize and distill all of your data. Having a pile of raw data makes everything more difficult.
Mhm.
And it's not just for the analysts, it's for your management as well. One thing that happens as an incident is that you need to be able to tell a story about what happened. You need to build a timeline of here's all the things that happened and how we deal with them. And if you have to pull that data from 15 different sources and then try and paste it into a PowerPoint or something, it's going to be very painful every time.
Absolutely.
Um, then for number three, I'd say try and put some rigor around your system as soon as possible. None of us like documentation. We all just want to start typing and throw something out and let it run. But in the long run, your life will be easier if you put some structure around it from the beginning.
And that's what we're hoping with this book too, to
Mhm.
have give companies that structure because every organization's needs can be different and there's not really like this is like compliance, there's checks and requirements. So like, oh, MFA, okay, on. But there's no like data strategy check. Like you do this and you're set. So it's companies having to figure it out on their own. And our hope is that by sharing this knowledge from all of the authors like yourself, we provide that standard, that kind of like, how do you measure the success or maturity level of your strategy?
Mhm.
Thank you for contributing to it and also sharing from your personal experiences in the book. Now, I want to talk about the subject that's like the buzzword of the year, which is AI. So, what are your thoughts on the role of AI in data management? Now, I know uh, there's pros and cons, there's two sides. There's like, yes, you can use LLMs to process much faster and give you summarized results, but then there's the security risks that not many people take into account, like LLM hallucinations or data poisoning and so on. So curious to see what side you're on.
Um, I'm not a huge fan of AI for the simple reason that the bad guys can use it just as well as anybody else. It has been an issue with things like social engineering, phishing, deep fake voice and video used for business email compromise, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
On the positive side, I haven't seen a ton of great use cases for defenders. The most useful things have been, I don't know, like analyzing knowledge bases. Like maybe you can have your junior analyst ask an LLM how to do something or what the procedure is for something. Something that's maybe a bit more useful is having an LLM get you up to speed on something you don't understand. So speaking of technical debt, let's say you have some source code that was written by an employee who left the company 10 years ago, and you have no idea what this source code does. Being
Mhm.
able to point an LLM at it and just ask what's going on, I think is super helpful. I
Mhm.
don't think that we have reached a point where we just have, criminal AIs going head to head in the network, battling packet to packet with defender AIs. I don't know that we'll ever get to that point. But at least in terms of analyzing huge batches of text, it's useful for that.
Do you
It's
see?
also good for composing awkward emails.
Well, in the platforms that you use or have experience with, I'm sure a lot of tools and platforms are adopting AI in some form of fashion. Um, whether it's a big at bigger scale, like actually processing the data that they're getting in, or at a on a smaller scale, to help you just summarize the events and your logs that you already have. Um, do you have any experience with using those features of AI because of the platforms that you've adopted or played with?
I would say what we've used operationally is typically referred to as machine learning rather than AI. Most people, when they say AI, what they mean are LLMs, and we don't have a huge use for those. But if you're talking about something like anomaly detection, that's definitely useful. Like we have a system that tells us if an IP inside our network is sending traffic to somewhere that it doesn't normally send to, or sending an abnormally large amount of traffic. That kind of thing is super useful.
So more like model creations out of ordinary behavior, and then what's outside of model through machine learning. That's what you see more value in.
Mhm.
Great, great. Now, towards the end of this, I'd like to ask if what's your favorite part of data strategy and what's like a nightmare part that you don't want to deal with again.
I don't know. I think my favorite parts were in the beginning, just coming up with all these new ideas and putting them out into the world and seeing how well they worked. That was very fun and very rewarding. The nightmare is probably the documentation.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything that you want to share based on your experience that I think our viewers who are trying to figure out, you know, the the maturity level, not beginners. I mean, in the beginning, we talked about the three pieces of advice for someone just starting. But let's say someone's already mature enough to have those foundations, but they're thinking of how to revise, how often to revise, how to future-proof with what they already have. Maybe they just walked into an organization that had everything set, and now they're trying to figure out like, oh, we could end up in a lock-in, but how often do would be a better practice for organizations to revise the strategy and to go over things that are already implemented?
I don't think there's a fixed amount of time. I would say it depends a lot on your incidents. So as you work through incidents, you are going to find gaps in your data. You're going to find capabilities that you didn't know that you needed. You're going to find data that was missing, that sort of thing. So as you move forward, always be learning from your incidents and creating new plans based on hurdles that you run into. And of course, every year is a new budget season, and you're always reviewing your contracts as they come up, and those are great opportunities to look for better solutions.
And how is our community doing as a whole in terms of talking about this problem? I mean, we talk about security, we talk about AI, we talk about compliance and all of that, but how often do you see in your network people talking about data as the core of their fundamental needs for security or as governance need? And are people more inclined to the catchy buzzwords like zero trust and all that, or is this being talked about more or less? What are your thoughts?
Say it depends on who you're talking to. Most practitioners, particularly on the operational side, are fairly immune to buzzwords. The buzzwords get more and more effective the further you get up the management chain.
Okay.
Someone who is sitting in front of a SIM working an incident is probably not thinking, gosh, I wish I had some kind of blockchain integrated into this. They're thinking, gosh, I really had logs from this router.
That's a good way to put it. So it's more like the influencer buzz than like the actual people on boots. Yep.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Matt, for sharing your thoughts and really transparently helping the community with the lessons learned from your own experience. Um, Before we wrap things up, are there any, do you have a message for our viewers as well as the future readers of the book?
Your life can be easier, and it's not that hard.
That's a very concise and direct, deep message. Like, don't
Uh-huh.
lose hope, keep
Don't
fighting,
lose hope.
keep moving forward. That should be
Yeah, it's a tough business to be in because we deal with a lot of negative situations. We have a job that can often be thankless. We have a job where we can be treated very negatively for the one thing that we failed to do while not being rewarded for the thousand things that we got right.
Oh
And
yeah,
so it's really important to focus on those successes. Focus on the fun things, the areas where you can be creative, where you can come up with new solutions, and where you can feel good about the work that you're doing.
absolutely. I think we all need that encouragement,
Mhm.
especially during the holidays when everyone's like enjoying their breaks, but the security peeps have to have
Oh,
to
yeah.
keep the lights turned on.
We've all been on that Christmas Eve incident bridge.
Absolutely. Actually, I'm curious then, what about people who want to get into cybersecurity? There's so many different messaging out there. There is get certifications, or there is get experience, or there is like college, no college degree. What was your path to getting here, and what do you want to say to people who are trying to get into it?
I would say first, figure out what you love to do. Security is a super broad field. I mean, it could be something like incident response, where you're doing forensics or looking at alerts or something like that. Or it could be something like compliance, where you are checking other people's work. Or it could be architecture, where you're making sure that systems are secure as they're deployed. It could be a number of things. So find the thing that you're super interested in first, because when you have passion for something, that's really going to show through.
Mhm. Was that your path? Like, what motivated you?
Well, in college, I worked for a little dial-up ISP, and I was super interested in security. And so I started out actually working customer support and volunteered to be a system administrator.
Nice.
Fortunately, my mentors at that company allowed me into the servers, and I only bricked one of them once with a firewall rule. While I was there, I met someone who was actually a customer of the ISP and had some good talks with him, and he hired me out of college, and I've been here ever since.
Wow. So you've been at the same company since graduating from college.
I have. I would
Nice.
definitely say that experience trumps education. Very little of my actual former college or former formal college education goes into what I do on a daily basis. The reason I got my job was because of my hobbies of security and system administration that I was doing off the side of my desk, rather than like the calculus courses or whatever I took as part of a computer science degree.
Same. I did electrical engineering, but I'm here, so I totally echo that sentiment. But do you think like the initial process though, where you submit your resumes, the HR screening and all that, do you think it over in that level it does matter to show that you have a degree or is certifications now the way to go? What do you think?
I personally don't put much stock in certifications. I would say that security is a mindset rather than a skill set. A good security person is someone who will look at any system and think, how could that break? Like, what could go wrong with that?
Mm.
So I look for someone with good problem solving skills, someone with a little bit of a devious mind, somebody who can find the ways that everything can go wrong. And we can layer the technical skills on top of that. I'll
Mm.
say the one technical skill that I do look for in candidates is the ability to do some kind of programming or scripting. If
Mm.
you can't program, then you're stuck doing everything manually for the rest of your life.
Mm. That's a good,
Being able to automate your job is a good life skill.
also much needed in all of the organizations.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Matt, for sharing your thoughts and for the word of encouragement for people who are looking to get into cybersecurity, or just dealing with so much noise in the security realm that don't give up, keep moving forward. There is hope. There is light at the end of the tunnel.
Uh-huh.
Hearing that, and also your own personal journey. I mean, you've had lessons to learn. It wasn't all ideal and perfect from the beginning, but
Mhm.
you've been able to make it mature over time and get to where you are. So that's a hope for the organizations that are right now overwhelmed and drowned in data that there we do have a lot of advancements now. We have people talking about it like mad and all, but also the platforms and tools out there that are available to help with automations or help with normalizations and observability or visibility. So don't
Mhm.
lose hope, and just like Matt said, keep going. Thank
Yeah,
Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate and enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to hearing more about the book from the readers after we publish it.
absolutely. Super excited.
Thank you.